So, welcome to another episode of the Func Prog podcast with me, Christopher. And in this episode, I'm talking to Giacomo, who's going to talk a bit about Gleam and, I guess mostly Gleam. But for those who don't know you, Giacomo, like who are you?
Well, hello everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm Giacomo. I'm an Italian developer, and I'm one of the people who's part of the Gleam core team. So I'm one of the people who's building the language, which is quite exciting. It's been 2 years, I think, now that I've been doing this, and it is just amazing, I think. So, well, I think I should just say what Gleam is for those.
Yeah. Let's start there. It's okay. Good way to start.
So Gleam is a functional programming language. I used to say it's a new functional programming language, but right now it's been 2 years that Gleam has been V1, so not quite as new. Well, the elevator pitch, the sales pitch is that Gleam is a friendly language for building type-safe systems that scale, so there's quite a lot here. Well, number one, Gleam is a functional programming language, and it is friendly. That's the number one thing we say about Gleam, the first thing you'll read in its website. And I think that is one of the main things going on for Gleam. It's one of the things we put a lot of care into. And people might say, what is a friendly language? What does it mean for a language to be friendly? Because sometimes I remember when I was at university, for example, I was getting started with programming languages. I had never done any coding before. And I remember I was fighting with the languages I was writing. Like the IDE kept shouting at me, showing me red squiggles and error messages I couldn't understand. And it felt quite frustrating at the beginning. When you think maybe it could be better, well, yes, it can be. And I think Gleam is one such example of a language being quite nice and approachable, friendly, one might say. So it's easy to get started, to get a nice developer experience and so on.
Yeah, I think that's really an interesting design for a language, I think, to have that sort of as a design goal, to have it be friendly. Because usually you hear a lot of languages, like, they have, when they talk about their selling points, it's like performance, or like this is, expressive, etc. But I think Gleam is probably the first programming language that I know of that has like friendly as one of its design goals.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think...
Yeah, sorry.
I think we're learning from many great languages here. I'm not sure it's like an explicit, like stated goal, but Elm for sure is a great source of inspiration here, because Elm has amazing error messages. It's a really pleasant, smallish language. Rust as well as some great error messages. The compiler is really good. Gleam kind of takes inspiration from those languages and the amazing error messages and nice developer experience, and builds upon that to see like what if we wanted to make a language that is really nice to use, as a great developer experience, and so on.
And like when you work on Gleam, does this this design goal come up a lot in discussions?
I think it's like the main thing driving like the Gleam development, because to be a friendly language, a language that is pretty straightforward, easy to pick up. Of course, it's always a game of trade-offs. You need to pick some and drop some, and so for example, Gleam is really strong on this idea of only having one way of doing things, which is kind of reminiscent of the Zen of Python. I was just thinking about that, actually. Zen of Python. I'm not sure it's no longer the case, but that's one Pythonic thing, one might say. So in Gleam, for example, whenever we're thinking about adding a new feature, because I remember, especially when I started contributing, I was like, oh, this would be cool. What if we added this and that and this and that? And Louis Pilford, the creator of the language, is actually really good at saying no, but like asking why do we need this? Like, do we have any concrete problems today in the language that we cannot easily solve that would warrant adding this feature to the language, adding complexity to the language? And most of the times the answer is no. There's no issue. It was just because I thought it was cool and I would love to have it in my language, but it was not motivated by any explicit need. So whenever we're adding something to the language, it's because we've found that there's a need for something that we can't really address today. And so there's no big new features every new release of Gleam, but there's loads of additions as far as developer experience, language server, like language in general, and all those little nice things that really do matter when you're developing in a language, rather than one big new feature you're adding or the new syntax to do something slightly differently, maybe a bit more shorter. So one thing in Gleam that some newcomers might face is maybe you're used to trying to squeeze as much as possible from a single line of code, trying to condense as many things into a single line and make something very terse, which is really nice. It can feel quite empowering. However, when you go back to it and you try and read it, maybe a week later, a month later, a year later, who knows, it's going to be really hard because then that code is quite inscrutable. And Gleam decides to go to the opposite end of the trade-off. So it's a bit more verbose in places, but it gives you code that is easier to read and maintain over time, rather than code that takes a little less typing to write.
But do you have any like concrete examples of things that you were rejected because they were not like friendly enough?
So one big feature that it's even in the frequently asked questions in the Gleam's website is type classes / interfaces. So some sort of traits, one might call them, coming from Rust. So it's one of those features that is not in the Gleam language. So when you think about Gleam, it's a statically typed functional programming language. It has this very run-of-the-mill, pretty straightforward, nominal Hindley-Milner type system. So we like saying it's state-of-the-art, but from the 80s. And it's as simple as it can be, and there's no fancy features like interfaces, traits, type classes, whatever other name you might have for those, to get that kind of behavior. And that is an explicit trade-off we decided, and something we explicitly decided against, because it's not enabling anything new. So anything that you can do with those, you can already do in Gleam today. So it's not enabling anything that we can't really do today. But at the same time, adding them to the language would make it a lot more complex, make the error messages less good, because having type classes, traits, and such makes producing nice error messages a lot harder. So that is quite the challenge. And at the same time, not enabling something you can't do today. And generally, this means that, of course, it's always a trade-off. I think I quite like the way Gleam goes. It makes a lot of sense for the language. It's very simple. Sometimes people say it reminds them of Go, for example, like a sort of functional Go, because it's a very simple language. It's quite small. I don't remember the exact count, but I think like there's only a couple, like 10, 12, something like this keywords in the language. And
that's not much.
Yeah, it's quite small. It fits in a slide. I remember doing a presentation about Gleam and I had all the keywords in a slide and it was quite empty. So yeah, it's pretty small.
Yeah, it's okay. You can show that to someone like, oh, now you know Gleam.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's very interesting, I think. And I think there's always this tension, right? Like people want to have like more and more power, but I think it's also easy to underestimate like the cost of those features. Like you said, like it's very hard. like anyone who's ever programmed Haskell for any amount of time knows that like you can get very strange compiler errors, for example, when you do like type class related things. And like there's I mean, the type class resolution logic in Haskell is quite complex as well, because you just sort of have to start solving constraints, like is there any concrete type that satisfies all of these constraints, for example. And
I mean, it's really underestimated, I think, simplicity as a feature of a language, because we think of all the features, but I think sometimes having a language that has a small surface area, something like that you can wrap your head around without having to look at hundreds of pages of references, is quite nice. It's a really nice feature in itself that we could strive for. I mean, it makes sense to have a language, like to want a language that is different, but at the same time, I think having a simple language can be quite empowering as well.
Yeah, I think especially like when you're working in a team of other developers, and you know, developers come and go, and I think if you have like a super expressive language, and this is also something I really appreciate about Python. Like I did a lot of Python previously in my career, and one of the things I really appreciate is that you can crack open pretty much any Python code base and get oriented quite quickly, because you sort of like, it's only familiar stuff. Like people are pretty good at I don't know, writing Pythonic Pythonic code, because they sort of know that okay, it's like there's a value in simplicity. Like you said, it's not always a good thing to be able to squeeze out, you know, the maximum power per line. Sometimes it's good to actually be explicit and write things out.
Yeah, and so there's some really nice like experiences from people using Gleam in production who were saying, yes, onboarding is quite simple with Gleam. It's a really nice choice for that, because we can easily get people up to speed with Gleam and start contributing to the code base. For example, we have this language tool, so it's at tour.gleam.run, I think. You'll find it in the Gleam's homepage, the big try Gleam button. So there's this tour of the language that goes through everything there is to know to Gleam, like all the features that you can that are in the language, and it's fairly small. I think I managed to have friends complete it in an afternoon or two. So it's really simple to go through everything there is to know. And of course, you're not you will not become an expert, but you will start understanding the code you're reading, and you can start doing things and contributing to a code base. It is really nice.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds good, I think. But are there any other features that Gleam has that also add to this friendliness? You mentioned something about like the language server, for example. Does the friendliness influence the way the tools work as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So with Gleam, like the idea is to have a friendly language. But when we are developing, like nowadays in 2026, now that we're recording this, like we don't just type something in a notepad and then run the compiler. That's not how we expect to be able to develop something in a language. There's quite a high bar for a language to clear in order to be considered good and nice to use. For example, we expect languages to have a language server, something for our editor to be able to show us the little squiggles, the errors, the warnings, code actions, auto-completions, all those nice features that make writing a language easy. We need a way to run our code, to test it, to bundle it, to maybe publish it if we're building libraries, format it as well. So it's important to be able to format our code. So there's a lot of things that we need to be able to do. Deal with dependencies, for example. It's really painful when you have to figure out which dependency manager you need to use for the language you're using, because then there's a lot of choices. You need to figure out which one is better and so on. And so with Gleam, there's loads of tooling that comes out of the box with the Gleam executable. So it's not just the language, but you get a language server integrated into the toolchain. So that is developed by us alongside the Gleam compiler, which makes it really nice for us to add new features, to add loads of things. There's a package manager to deal with dependencies, add new dependencies to your project, and so on and so forth. There's a build tool to run and test your code, to publish it, to publish documentation, for example. And then there's finally a formatter, which I'm really fond of because it's one of the first parts I started contributing to in Gleam.
Okay. Yeah.
And that formats your code for you. So you have all those toolings that maybe sometimes they come off as separate projects that maybe are not even maintained by the authors of the language, that instead, in this case, are all bundled into the Gleam executable. And so you get a ton of mileage out of it, because now you don't have to worry about all those things, like which dependency manager do I use, which formatter do I use, which configuration should I use, and so on and so forth. It's all going to be the same for every Gleam developer, which is really nice, because again, when you start working on a different code base, you can expect them, well, you know that they will be using the same toolchain, because that is the Gleam toolchain. I think that's quite nice.
It sounds very nice, because like, it's so easy to end up in this paradox of choice when you start to learn a new language, when you have to learn, like, not only do you have to learn a bunch of new tools, you also have to decide, like, okay, which tool is the right one, like which one should I use?
Yeah. And also you start working for a different team, and maybe they're using an entirely different tool chain and different formatter, different code style, different package manager even. And it can get quite messy, and you end up with 15 different configuration files in the root of your project, because then you need to do a lot of those things. Yeah.
I mean, again, as a Python developer, I'm very aware of this. It's like, every tool has its own. It's gotten a lot better, but like there was a time where it's like, this PyTest framework, it uses a pytest.ini file, and then you have the requirements that's in another file, etc.
Yeah.
But was this in part inspired by Cargo for Rust?
It was a huge source of inspiration, as far as I'm aware. So Rust, for sure, like the toolchain, Rust's toolchain has been a big source of inspiration here. Because it's really good. It has a great developer experience. I mean, the Gleam compiler itself is written in Rust, and I've found I'd never written any Rust before this, basically. And I found
really?
That it has
so
a great
you really jumped into the deep end, like.
Yeah.
Let me start by contributing to a compiler.
But yeah, I think it's really reminiscent of the Rust developer experience here. So if you enjoy that, you will enjoy the Gleam developer experience as well. They're both really nice languages, I think.
Yeah, I think this whole theme is kind of very interesting, because I wish I had the comment. I saw someone writing something on Twitter the other day that. Now I think I forgot the whole thing, but the essence of it was like, like, why isn't this thing that's so technically superior much more popular? And the thing in question almost had no, or like it was something about, like, okay, these things, like, they don't matter. What matters is, like, if it's like powerful and expressive. But I mean, no, actually, like, it's a classic. I think it's a really classic mistake to make. It's like, things need, marketing to become popular, and user, like, the onboarding experience is part of that marketing. Like, if people are gonna, like, churn out. Now I remember. They thought it was like, they were tired of this, like, very verbose CLI tools that gave a lot of output to the user, etc. And that might seem frivolous if you're like a really experienced hacker and this is like the 15th language or something you learn. But if you're a newcomer, it's like, you sort of feel that, okay, well, this is a welcoming user experience. Like, I feel like someone actually cares about my experience when I'm using this.
Absolutely. I think it is what makes or breaks a language when you start trying something. Because if you want to try a language and then you have to figure out all those intricacies and it's really hard to use, you're gonna bounce off the language. So if you instead start trying something and maybe it has an interactive tool that you can run in the browser without having to install anything, and then you install it and you have a lot of nice tooling, and maybe there's also a helping community behind it, then you're going to have a much better time with it, and maybe you're going to recommend it to others and start using it. I mean, at the end of the day, I think all languages are really good nowadays, and rarely the language decision matters that much. Usually you want to use the language you're the most familiar with in your team, or the one your team is most comfortable with. So I think, like, as language developers, what we can do is we can try and make it as nice as possible for people to use, so that people can feel comfortable using it and recommending it. And Gleam is really, like, production ready. It has been for quite a few years now. It has been V1 for 2 years, I think, now. It is being used in production. It has a really nice ecosystem. It's growing by the day. So yeah, I think we are in a pretty good spot right now.
Yeah, speaking of, like, I mean, it's something that people might not notice is that, like, even though Gleam itself is new, it like the foundations are built upon, like, tested and or like battle tested technologies, like the BEAM, for example. Could you tell me about more about, like, what does, like, the BEAM, or sorry, what Gleam compiles down to? Because I understand there are multiple ways to run Gleam as well.
Okay, so Gleam can compile down to 2 different languages. So it can be compiled down to Erlang and run on the BEAM virtual machine, which is the virtual machine capable of running Erlang code, or it can compile to JavaScript and run everywhere JavaScript can run, which is basically everywhere. So Node, Dino, Bun, the browser, for example, which puts us in a really nice position, because Gleam can then take advantage of these 2 amazing runtimes. Like the JavaScript runtimes, they're really good. They've been optimized like crazy. They're everywhere, V8 and so on. And also the BEAM runtime, which might be a bit more unfamiliar to people. It's not as flashy as the JVM, for example. Maybe that's the one that people are most familiar with as a virtual machine. But it is an amazing runtime. It's been battle tested for 30 years now. So it was developed in the 80s, if I recall correctly.
Yes.
Yeah, in the 80s by Ericsson. Because at the time they had this very specific problem. So they were building phone switches, electronic phone switches, and they needed to be able to, like, program the switches. And so if you think about phone switches, they have some strict requirements, like they cannot go down, because if the switch goes down and then everyone who's making a phone call, the call gets dropped, it's not really nice.
Yeah,
they need to deal with hundreds and thousands of phone calls happening at the same time. So they need to be efficient, resilient. A single node failing shouldn't mean the entire system is failing. So it needs to be fault tolerant as well. And at the time, those were very specific needs. And they built this virtual machine exactly to address those needs. But if you think about it, being fault tolerant, distributed, and again, working in a distributed asynchronous setting, that is like what we need by all, like, applications who are building anything that is like, any web related thing, application, backend, etc., needs this kind of features. And so the BEAM, which was a niche thing at the time, really has become something that can power incredible systems nowadays. If I recall correctly, there was this number at an ElixirConf, which is another language that can run on the BEAM, where they were saying that most of the internet goes through nodes that are running the BEAM virtual machine, because it is what powers a lot of Cisco hardware, for example.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so it's really cool. It's an amazing system. And Gleam, again, compiling down to this language, can run on the Beam and take advantage of these features. And so you can build, for example, backends that can sustain the highest of workloads, even under the highest percentiles, and be reliable, not drop a lot of messages. And if a node goes down, your entire system is not going down. So say you're writing a web server, there's a faulty request. It's not stopping grinding the entire system to a halt. That is isolated by design, because the virtual machine, that's how it works. So yeah, I think it's really nice, quite powerful. I wish I had the time to go more in depth in the Beam. It's really mind-blowing, a mind-blowing piece of technology.
Yeah, no, the Beam is it's very powerful, and it's like, it's almost one of those things that's like, like Paul Graham's the blob paradox. Like if you've only seen like one language, it's kind of hard to imagine what you're missing out on if you if you haven't used any other languages. And I kind of feel like the Beam is kind of like that, because it makes certain things that would be almost impossible in other languages, like trivially easy. So you can do like really, really cool stuff with the Beam. But it can also compile to JavaScript, and you can do like front-end development in Gleam as well.
Yeah, that's a very cool thing. Actually, I think one of my first Gleam projects was some front-end thing built with Gleam. So it can compile to JavaScript, and that means you get to you can run it on JavaScript runtimes like Node, Dino, Bun. But one thing that is really exciting to me is you can also run it in the browser, because the code it compiles to is pretty straightforward JavaScript that can run anywhere, any fairly modern, not ancient runtime. And it's really nice, because then there's frameworks like Lustre, for example, which is a Gleam front-end framework that allow you to build interactive applications that run entirely on the client, because it compiles down to JavaScript, and then you get to do interactive applications, something where the user gets a nice experience, even if it is offline and not talking to a server, because it's running entirely in your browser. And also, because you can compile your Gleam code to both JavaScript and Erlang, you get a really nice full stack development picture here, because you can write your Gleam code that runs on the client, and then the Gleam code that powers your server, one is running on the Beam, one is running on JavaScript. And then you can have, for example, some shared pieces of code, maybe some shared definitions or shared functions that could be useful for both projects, both the client and the server. And you get nice code reuse across the stack, for example. And that is another really nice thing. I haven't had that much experience with full stack front-end development. I know that there's some projects written in Lustre, so they can run on the client. And another nice thing that Lustre does, which is really mind-blowing, I have no idea how it works under the hood, don't ask me. So you can also write components, like real web components, that you can then decide where are going to run. So if something you want it to run on the client, because it needs to give the user that nice interactive experience, even if the internet connection is down. So buttons and all of that. But you can also write those components and run them on the server, maybe because they need to be close to the data. So maybe you have this table component that needs to show you the rows of your database or something, and then you can decide to run it on the client. So you're not sending all the serialized data to the client and then it needs to decode it and all of that, but it can just send the HTML patches, and then each component gets to run wherever it makes most sense. So what needs to be close to the data can be on the server, and whatever needs to be interactive and live, even with no internet connection, can easily be on the client. And then those will be talking and sending back and forth the HTML patches that you need to get a nice interactive application. It's a really interesting project. It's amazing. I think if you had to just have a look at one Gleam project to see how cool Gleam is, that would be Lustre.
But that sounds really cool, like the fact that you can sort of have like isomorphic Gleam applications.
Yeah, just one thing to note though is if since the two runtimes, the BEAM and JavaScript, they have very different concurrency models. If you're doing something that has to do like with things that are specific to a JavaScript runtime, maybe you're dealing with promises, you're dealing with the navigator object in the browser, etc., that code won't run on the BEAM, of course, because it works entirely differently. But anything that is not touching like the I/O part, so the part where you're doing like asynchronous concurrent stuff on the JavaScript target, for example, will run just fine on both targets and you won't even notice it. For example, Gleam's standard library works flawlessly on both targets. And there's a lot of projects that work just like that out of the box on both targets.
Yeah, I'm thinking things like, for example, like form validation, for example. You might want to run that in the client just to give like a nice and interactive user experience. But you would probably also need to do that on the server to like sanitize input and things like that. So then you could, I guess that means you could reuse this code.
Absolutely,
and
yeah.
it on both the client and the server.
I actually did that. I think it was a while ago. Well, it was a while ago, but yes, there's this form validation library that you can use on both targets.
Oh, that's very nice. Very nice. Yeah, it's. I feel like the maybe the future of programming languages is going to be more like this. I'm thinking sort of the cryptocurrency or the smart contract folks. I think they had a lot of good ideas regarding the thing that you can have like a piece of code that doesn't need to run like in any specific place. It's more like a contract between different participants. And it feels like the fact that you can take this piece of code and run it in different, like on the client or on the server. I don't know. I just think that's a promising direction for languages to take. So I don't know. It will be exciting to see where things end up. But I want to cycle back a bit. Like if you take us back to the beginning. Like, how did you get involved in the Gleam project from the beginning?
That's a fun story. So I was fresh out of university. I think 3-4 years now. It's been a while. So I finished my master's degree, and I didn't really know what to do. I just knew I liked functional programming languages. And I had a love for learning new languages. That was kind of my thing, the thing that I was really into. I did a lot of functional programming. My final 2 years of university got really into Haskell and Scala. And then I remember I took this course that was that touched upon Erlang. The language that runs on the BEAM and the BEAM. It was quite like on superficial knowledge of Erlang, so it didn't go deep into the weeds of OTP and that. But it was very interesting. I remember thinking, this sounds cool. So when I was out of university, I was looking for a new language to learn, kind of taking some time off before starting to look for a job. And so I remember this Erlang and BEAM thing, and I started, I think, trying to learn Elixir. But then I saw Gleam, and it was the Gleam website. Everyone should go and have a look at it. It was all pink. It was really cheerful, playful. And I remember thinking, this is my language. This is my kind of language. It's really nice, even though I didn't have any idea.
Okay, but it was really like love at first sight.
Yes, absolutely. It was love at first sight. And so I joined the Gleam Discord. So that's Gleam as an official Discord where the community hangs, the creator of the language is there, for example, or the core team is there. I am there. I'm always online. So you will find me there if you need to have a chat later. And I remember joining, and everyone was really nice. Like the first thing I remember is I joined, and then because my idea was I will be lurking in the Discord. Like I join and never send a message. As soon as I join, I remember Louis, the creator of the language, saying that I have a really nice profile picture. And I was like, oh, this has never happened to me. I never had this kind of interaction with someone who created a programming language. And everyone was really nice. And I thought maybe I could try and do something in Gleam. So I started looking at issues for the standard library. At the time, Gleam was pre-V1, so not stable yet. And so I started doing some little things in the standard library. I think my first PR was like a fixed typo kind of PR. So there was a typo in documentation, I fixed it.
Yeah, and you have to get started somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And I think those are like the easiest way to get started. And the interaction was really nice. Like the Louis reviewed my PR. He was really kind and it got merged quite quickly. And so I started doing more and more. And then one day I thought maybe I could try working on the compiler of the language itself. That would be fun. And so I started contributing. As I was saying earlier, I started working on the formatter first. There were a couple of issues I thought I could give it a try. And so I started contributing, making PRs. And it kind of snowballed from there. So I kept contributing. And I think after a year or something, one day Louis sent me a DM and said, hey, do you want to be part of the core team? And I was like, sure, I've been waiting for this.
Yeah, I mean, that's very cool. Like, so you just, gradually started contributing more and more. And how much? What do you spend your time on now? Like, how much time do you spend like working on Gleam? Would you say?
So I like to say that it is my like part-time, full-time job, kind of, because basically most of my day I spend it coding either in Gleam or for the Gleam compiler in the Gleam compiler. I would say now I do loads of bug fixing and whatever needs me looking into that. I tend to work on like try and adding new features when we have something that we want to add maybe to the language server, maybe new code actions for the language server or something like that. I always like and try and take a stab at it. And so, yeah, that's most of my coding day. I do mostly Gleam and the Gleam compiler.
Okay, and because you do a lot of like evangelism as well. Like you had a very nice talk at our Func Prog conference last year. Thank you for that.
Oh, it was an amazing conference. I really mean it. I was amazed by how good it was, and also it was the first time you were doing it. I won't take too much credit for that either. I think it was like a joint effort. Everyone, all the speakers were really good. And the venue turned out really nice. And I don't know, it was just a good time. I'm not even sure how it happened myself. By far the best venue I've ever been to for a conference. Oh my gosh, it was so classy. I loved it.
Yeah, it's kind of like it had a really fun vibe. We're setting up the next one. We're gonna release more details. Might just do a bit of advertising while I'm talking about it. funcprogconf.com. We're getting ready for the 2026 edition. If you want to be first in line to get early bird tickets, sign up at funcprogconf.com. Yes.
Nice.
Thank you for the sponsorship. A word from our sponsors.
Getting back to the evangelizing, that's one thing I love doing. I discovered I have a passion for public speaking and talking at conferences. So it was 2024, at the end of 2024, I think, and I set myself the goal of trying to talk to conferences because I thought it was fun. I went to a couple of conferences as an attendee. So I went to Lambda Days, for example. While I still was a student, I got like some nice discounts, and so I could afford to go there. And I remember thinking, it would be really fun if I were talking at one of these. And so when I started doing Gleam, I thought I could try and like spread my love for the language because at the end of the day, I think as long as like a speaker, I remember like the talks I enjoy the most are the ones where you can see the speaker has a passion for the thing they're talking about, where they're very enthusiastic. And so I was thinking maybe I could try and do the same thing because I love this thing. I'm very enthusiastic about Gleam. I know quite a bit about it. So I could try and maybe do this. And so I started submitting to conferences, and I think I went to 10 conferences. Now I have 10 conferences like under my belt, and it's been an amazing experience. So yeah, whenever I'm not coding, I'm preparing talks and thinking about what I could be talking about. That's another big thing I love doing. Yeah,
that's very nice. And I mean, I've watched a few of your presentations by now, and something that I always think about is that you're very I don't know how to put it, but it's the delivery is always very tight. Like, do you like how do you and compared to me, I'm always all over the place. I'm messy. I go on tangents. But like, you know, when I watch you, you're like doom doom doom. I was like, wow. How do you do that, Giacomo? Do you have any tips?
So that's funny because I remember someone commenting on one of my talks. It was really nice. I loved it, but the speaker should try talking a bit slower because not everyone is not like as smart as they are, and so they should try and talk a bit slower. But yeah, the thing is, whenever I'm doing talks, I never submit a talk unless I'm 100% sure it is like ready or good, or I know I can get it done because most of it is already done. So I don't do like the conference-driven development where I submit a talk and then write the talk. Like when I'm submitting it, it has been written and I have rehearsed it at least a couple of times.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the trick is you just have to rehearse a lot, because that's how you get good at something. At coding, for example, you have to code a lot to get good at it. And the same is for talking. So I just talk a lot. So I'm the death of my brother and my parents who have to listen to me constantly talking about things. But that's the only way you can get good at something. Sadly, there's no really like secret trick. You have to try it, do it a lot, and once you do it a lot, you start getting the hang of it. What I like to do is like I start talking without having like a plan or anything, and I just start saying things. And as I'm talking, I think, oh, this is cool. This will be in the final talk. And then I start, as I repeat it more and more, I keep like consolidating those pieces that I like, adding new things as I go on. And then I start cutting down things for time if I'm going over time. And that's basically my workflow. So I start talking, and if I find something interesting, it's going to be in the final talk, and I just keep going.
It sounds kind of like I mean, I've heard a lot of like stand-up comedians work like this when they sort of like when they start to develop a new set. They usually workshop the materials in like smaller clubs first, you know, and they might come up with a joke on the spot, or like, you know, refine something on stage, and then they sort of like gauge the reaction and like iterate, etc. And it sounds kind of similar to what you're doing.
Yeah, I'm an awful comedian, though I can see like the like seeing the reaction of the audience and then adjusting based on that is really, really nice. One thing I was thinking, and many people think, is like, okay, so I've prepared this talk and maybe I've already delivered the talk at some conference. Now I need to think of something new. No, that is a terrible mistake. You should reuse your talks as much as you can. Conferences really don't care all that much. They will say if they want you to do something original that hasn't been done before. That's because people going to conferences, they don't go to all the conferences. So there's no big overlap there. And as you give your talk to different and more conferences, you'll start refining it. You see what works and what doesn't in front of an audience. And then you can get better because you can maybe take something out that you realized was not as good and put something in that people were really happy with. Also, maybe they gave you some feedback after the conference. I remember my first conference was like one of my first big talks was at go to conferences in Copenhagen. And it's a 3-track conference, so there's 3 speakers talking at the same time at every given moment, except for keynotes. And I was at the same time as Chris Jenkins, who is an amazing speaker.
He's a heavy hitter.
Oh my God, they're so good. And so I was devastated because I was like, no one is going to come to my talk. And that was kind of what happened, because there were like 10 people in the audience, and then everyone was listening to Chris. I mean, I would have done the same, honestly. But like you can see, even if it's such a small audience, you can see if someone is smiling and nodding, or if someone is kind of looking away and not paying much attention. So you can see what kind of catches the attention of your audience and what doesn't. And that helps you like prepare a better talk for the next time. So my number 1 tip is, 1, don't be afraid of like submitting talks and trying to do it. Everyone can really do a talk as long as you're passionate about something. And 2, don't stop at the first submission you do. Maybe it gets rejected. Maybe you do your talk, but do submit the talk to more conferences, more and more conferences. That's the only way it's going to be better, and people will get to know you, and you are going to be able to talk to more conferences.
And you sort of like get better and better every time,
Yeah.
and the talks keep getting better and better. I just want to ask you real quick, like when you rehearse, do you have any special like way of rehearsing? Like you said, do you have like family members as your audience, or do you record yourself, or how does that? How do you do that?
So that at first I was using my family members. They got tired of it. I don't blame them. I mean, they also do not speak English, so it was just me babbling.
Okay, that makes more challenging.
Yeah, I don't record to myself. 1, because I hate listening to my recorded voice, so I would not listen to my recordings. I just talk as if I was in front of an audience. So I have my clicker, the one I use to move my slides. I don't use any notes, and I don't look at my slides, because I want to be as if I were on the stage looking at the audience. One thing that really irks me is when like the speaker, you can really tell they're reading the notes because they're looking down and reading the notes. I really like when a speaker is looking at the audience. And so when I'm repeating, I never use the notes, because I know that if I did, I would need the notes even when I'm doing the real thing.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
How do you like, what's the how do you start like a new presentation? How do you start working on it?
I don't know. Usually I tend to keep it very light on presentations, like I am blah, 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 I'm doing this, I'm doing that, today we will be talking about this and that. Because when you're talking to an audience, you really only have like a few minutes to get their interest. Otherwise, everyone, we are developers, we have our laptops, we have phones. Everyone is going to be at their laptop coding if the talk is not interesting.
Yeah.
So I only have a couple of minutes to get their interest. I will not waste it telling people who I am. I'm Giacomo, that's all you need to know. I'm part of the Gleam team. Okay, let's get started. Yeah. And then I just get into the thing. So one thing I really like is I like having loads of live coding. I think those are kind of the more interesting talks, at least for me. I do the talks that I would like to listen to. So I like talks with live coding. It's hard because you need to strike a balance. It doesn't have to be so hard that people cannot follow what you're doing. But at the same time, it can't be a hello world and that's it. That's your live coding. And that is something that takes maybe a couple of times to get a good feel for. Maybe this is too much, this is too little. I think that as long as the code can fit nicely on a slide, that is a good indication that you're doing the right thing. So maybe you have more chunks of code, but try and keep like each piece of code quite big on the slide. Because when you're presented with a slide that is just a wall of text, of code especially, oh God, your eyes just glaze over, you're not reading that. So that's one thing. But yeah, I just get into the meat of the thing I want to be talking. And I tend to start with a story. So like, picture maybe you're doing this, or you're testing your application and you're having these issues. You always have to start with like, what is this? Who is this talk for? Like, what is the issue you're facing that this talk will help you with. I have a talk about testing, snapshot testing, which is a really cool testing technique. And I always start with, okay, picture this. You're building an application, you're testing this function, but writing the test is really hard. And that is something people can connect with. They can think, oh God, I had this problem. I should listen to this guy because he's gonna solve my problem. So yeah, that's mainly the way I like to structure my talks. Yeah.
Oh, that's a very, very cool advice. So I mean, if anyone wants to like start making conference talks, like, you know, listen to Giacomo. But yeah, getting back to Gleam for a second, you said that there are companies using Gleam in production right now.
Yeah, it's really exciting and scary. So there's quite a lot of them. So on the Gleam website at gleam.run/case studies, you're going to see some case studies about people using Gleam in production. So there's, for example, this company called Strand. It's a marketing agency that's based in London, and they're using Gleam in production. And another one called Uncover, which is a company that is doing marketing mixed modeling, which is this really cool area where you kind of look at the data to kind of inform marketing decisions. That's my very narrow understanding of how it works. And we've had reports from them, and they were very encouraging. There's also a lot more people using Gleam in production. Just yesterday, someone was posting in the Gleam Discord that they are looking for Gleam developers for their production project. Yes, that's incredible. It's like an American-based company in St. Louis, I think. So if anyone is interested, join the Gleam Discord. The thing is going to be there. And there's this list as well of Gleam in production things on GitHub. I think it's maintained by one of the people in the Gleam community. And it's a lot of places that are using Gleam for production stuff, which is exciting. And the thing we've discovered with the case studies we did with Uncover and Strand, for example, is they were having a really nice experience with Gleam. And the really nice thing, I think it was from what the Uncover team had said. They said that they wouldn't be using Gleam if it wasn't a safe, boring choice, almost boring choice. And I think that is such a nice thing to say about a language, that it is almost boring. Yeah. Because you can rely on it. It's something that is not going to give you that moment where you don't know what you're doing. And so, yes, it was safe and sensible. They could do the onboarding quite quickly as well. And it ended up being a very reliable system, the thing they were building with Gleam. And that is really nice. So someone else was using Gleam, I think now a couple of years ago, in production for a production application. And they said, I think that this person is Aileen Noon. I'm hoping I remember the name correctly. And they said, I will always remember the quote, that Gleam makes their heart rate go down. It makes them feel calm. And again, that is what you want by a language. Because Gleam, at the end of the day, is not it's a functional programming language. It's not a research language. It's a language that is made to be used in production. It's a language for people who want to get things done and ship things. And so people saying, it is a very sensible choice because it makes me feel calm. It makes me feel safe about my code and feel reassured that it's not going to explode at 2 a.m. in the morning. I'm getting a pager call because I need to fix something that exploded in production. I think that's what you want by a language that's meant to be used by industry, by people doing things in production. So that's something that I think is really nice. We've discovered from these case studies. If you're curious about them, you can read the full case studies at the Gleam website. So it's gleam.run/case studies, case-studies.
Yeah, what have they told these companies? Do you know kind of what problem they were trying to solve by adopting Gleam? Was that something that came up? Was there something in their existing languages that they weren't happy with that Gleam could provide.
So for Strand, if I recall correctly, but I would say go read the case study because I've read it a little while ago. So for Strand, though, I remember, so they started building this system with Gleam because, well, people knew Gleam existed. They knew that Gleam was an option. And they needed this system to be reliable, to be fault tolerant, those very nice features that you get from Gleam, so from a statically typed language and also from the BEAM guarantees. And they started building this system that then ended up becoming bigger and bigger. And then they realized, okay, Gleam is really nice, so we can use this. So it started as like this one small part, and then it ended up becoming one of the most important parts of the system altogether, which it's quite nice. Like, because with Gleam, you can just do incremental adoption. So it's another really nice thing going on here. Because if you want to use it, it doesn't mean you have to like do everything in Gleam from the start, because again, that is not feasible. No one is going to rewrite everything in Gleam in the company.
Even if you could, it's probably not a good idea.
It's not a wise choice. As much as I like Gleam, I wouldn't do that if I had loads of code in other languages. But what you can do is maybe you have this service you need to be building, and again, being a service, maybe it's doing microservices, maybe it's an HTTP, an API server, whatever. You get to choose what tech stack you're building that in, if you have some degrees of freedom in your team. And then maybe you start experimenting with something. I've heard, for example, many people doing internal tooling with Gleam. Maybe not the customer-facing part of the software, but internal tooling, again, a really nice match. And then you start building confidence, and you realize, okay, this is nice. This is the developer experience I want. Maybe we could start including it more in our system. So maybe more services. Maybe some parts of your front end could start becoming Gleam. And again, since Gleam compiles to just regular JavaScript, maybe you can write some core of your features in Gleam, because you need that safety that typed language is giving you, and then use it from other languages, from JavaScript and TypeScript, for example. That's another way you can do incremental adoption in Gleam. So there's no all or nothing mentality here. Yeah. You can always slowly get some confidence, get it working, maybe get some buy-in from your team, and then you can kind of start writing more and more. Or maybe you realize it's not the right fit for you. Of course, it's not going to be the perfect language for everything. That's never the case for any language. But maybe sometimes you realize you really like it. I think a really nice thing, circling back to the developer experience, is, again, since we are building all these toolings, having this tooling baked into the language, one thing that is really nice is that from day one, when Gleam was V1, we had a language server, which was really nice. And I think in just 1 year, it has grown to be one of the best language servers I've used, period, in any language. I'm not saying this because I'm doing Gleam. I've used Rust, for example, which has an amazing language server, which I think it's really nice. But in general, having this project cared for by the core team, and it being a priority, really signals what we care about, people having a good developer experience. And so I was looking at the server the other day, and it has all the features you would expect from any very mature language server, like find references, go to definition, hover information, so when you're hovering over things, code completions, so suggestions and all of that, renaming things. It has more than 40 something code actions. So to refactor your code, to change the shape of your code, to add new things, to generate code. It is really nice. Basically, whenever you trigger something on your code, when you trigger code actions on your code, something is going to pop up, because there's so many different options and so much care into it. When we think maybe this would be nice to have as a code action because it would make our life easier. Okay, let's add it. And it's really straightforward to add it. I remember most of Gleam releases by now are just adding things to the language server and making it better and better. And I think right now it's one of the best ones I know of.
That's very cool. And Gleam hasn't been around for that long.
Yes.
Speaking of which, and I think a lot of this we probably covered already. But so Gleam came out. Was the first version released in 2019, or am I getting that?
I think it was later. Wait, I will quickly check the release notes because I'm pretty sure we had a news post about Gleam becoming V1. So let me see.
And the V1 thing is quite recent as well. Like, it was
Yeah. V1 is from 2024, so just less than 2 years. 2 years ago now. It will be 2 years in March. So yeah, it is mind-blowing to see something so good in such a little time. It's something you would expect from languages that have been around for a long time, not for something that is 2 years old.
Yeah. Gleam hasn't been around for long, but so when I checked the Stack Overflow developer survey from 2025, it was ranked the second most admired programming language, which I think is a super impressive accomplishment, especially considering that Rust, which I think was number one, is A has been around for much longer, and B is also like created by this corporation with lots of funding and many people working on it full time, etc. And I think maybe Elixir was number 3 or something. I don't remember, but Elixir has been around for a while. And we've talked a little bit about like the friendliness, etc. But do you think there's anything else that helped make Gleam so successful in such a short amount of time? Like if we want to go back and try to like debug this or like figure out like what's the secret sauce?
I mean, that was such a nice and unexpected surprise for me, seeing Gleam as the second most admired language. I don't know how it happened. I think like again, we've talked about it. The developer experience is really nice. Generally, the feeling I get is people using Gleam are quite impressed by that. And at least the one who care about sharing that with us. So it might very well be like one of those problems where you only hear the good feedback because that's what people are sharing with you. They're not saying to your face they hate the thing you're making. So that could be the case. But in general, yeah, I think people are very happy when they start using Gleam and see that it has such a nice developer experience. I don't know exactly how this happened. I'm really happy that it happened, and I'm hoping that it will be the case for the next year as well. Maybe we'll be number one day. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. No, I think it's quite incredible, and I think one thing it proves is that, like you said yourself before, like Gleam doesn't really bring anything completely new to the table, but it does come with like a very quite a different set of design priorities from other languages.
I would say, it's nothing like groundbreaking, but at the same time it feels fresh. I don't know if it makes sense, but when I tried it, I was like, this is really nice. I haven't seen a language that does this, like simple language. You can use it to build front and back end. It's really nice to use. It has a nice developer experience. It's functional. It's statically typed. It was really like the thing I was looking for, and I didn't know I needed it. And I remember Louis said when he was making Gleam, he was thinking, because he was like doing his day job. He was using different languages. He knew it. He was doing Elixir. He was writing Rust. He was doing other languages and such. And he was Go, for example. And he thought, there's this thing I like from this language, this thing I like from this language, this tooling that I love from this language, and so on and so forth. What if we had something that was all those things combined, taking all the bits that we like from different languages, the nice tooling from Rust, the simplicity of Go, the ADTs, algebraic data types from this and that. What if we could make this? What if Louis could make this? And then they went ahead and made Gleam, kind of wanting a language that would be a language that made you happy to be like coding your boring day job. Like if I could do my boring day job in Gleam, I would be happy because it would be a nice experience. I mean, I don't know if that's going to be the case for any language at a boring day job after some time, but you get the idea. Like the language that I would be happy to be using, developing code, like the boring code, the thing I have to do at my job, for example. And I think it really delivers on that. It makes writing this kind of code really nice, writing any kind of code really nice for what it matters, for what my opinion matters. I mean, I'm a bit biased, but I really like Gleam.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to be like completely neutral, but
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but I definitely see where you're coming from, and it's like, I mean, you can't discount like developer experience. It's very nice to have all of this tooling available straight out of the box and have it work well and be well integrated, etc.
Yes.
And like you said, like it feels like I think there might be a lot of value in the core team developing all of these features together. Because one thing you usually see when you have like a bunch of separate tools for everything is that, I mean, you might be the first person in the world to combine, or like maybe everyone is using tools A, B, and C, but you might be the first ones to combine them with like B, C, and D, for example. And then you get a whole bunch of like errors and strange issues that no one else has ever seen, just because like, you know, oh well, you need to use like this very specific thing, etc. But when everyone is using the same setup, it's much easier to sort of iterate on it, I think.
If I can share one anecdote. So I remember one thing that I was really impressed by with Gleam the first time I saw it. It was the formatter, again, going back to the formatter, because it is a formatter with zero configuration. So you do Gleam format, there's no way of changing the way it formats your code whatsoever, like with an external file, for example, and options. So everyone who's using the Gleam formatter is going to have their code formatted exactly the same way. Meaning, again, if you're going to work for a different team that's using Gleam, well, you're going to see code that has a familiar style because it's being formatted the same way. And I remember I was impressed by this. Coming from Scala, I was doing a lot of Scala at university. And I remember, not to pick on Scala, it's a great language, but I remember like doing this project with my friends. And we had to pick like some formatter. We picked Scala FMT, which I think is the de facto standard right now. And we had to choose how to configure it. And oh my God, it was so overwhelming. It's an incredible piece of software. It's an amazing formatter. It has so many ways to configure it that it's really hard to like, because again, we are developers and we will be bike shedding about style. That's what we love doing. And so if given the chance, we will do that. And I remember these endless talks about, okay, maybe we could enable this option and disable this one. And I wanted to format it like this. No, I want it like that. No, I want it like that, which is fun on its own, but not so much when you're working with a team with tight deadlines and every time you need to figure out how to format it, and then a big company comes up with their configuration and everyone uses that, and I don't know. No configuration sounds much better, much like I think Go format, the formatter of the Go language is doing, I think. Don't quote.
Yeah, no, that's also like famous for like it has no configuration.
Yeah.
Like everyone gets the same thing. I think like, you know, this was the case in the Python world for a long time as well. And then there was this formatter called Black that came along, which was like because of a phrase from like Henry Ford, you know, that famous one, like, you know, oh, the customer can have the car in any color they like as long as it's black.
Yeah, you can get your Gleam code however you like as long as it's formatted with Gleam format.
Yeah, because otherwise it's like, you know, the ultimate bike shedding thing where people are like, you know, like, you know, get the PR comment like, can you indent this a bit more?
Yes.
It's like, you know.
Oh my gosh, those are the worst kind of code reviews comments.
Yeah, I mean, if everyone has the same format and the same formatting rules, you simply like just forget that formatting exists.
Yes,
which I think is the ultimate like end goal. Like you shouldn't even think about it. I mean, speaking of tools and stuff, or like speaking of the Gleam as a as a language, like where do you see Gleam going in the next couple of years? Like, do you have anything specific on the roadmap, or what's the future of Gleam, you think?
That's a really good question. I'm afraid my answer won't be totally satisfying because mostly I have no idea where it will go. Like maybe for the next 6 months I have some ideas, but then I don't know. So there's a lot of things on our roadmap, like again, making the language server better. There's always more code actions that we could add, like more ways of more refactorings, more of that. And that's one thing that I think it's not very shiny, because like you make a release and you have huge amount of code actions. It's not the big new feature. It's not like the code is heaps faster and that. But again, the developer experience is a lot better. It doesn't make a headline, but I think it is what really matters. So that is one thing personally I'm excited about, making the language server even better over the course of the years. And I think there's still room for improvement. So that's exciting. Other things that I know are coming, inlining, so some optimizations in the compiler.
Oh, okay.
Right now we're pretty light on optimizations. Because the BEAM compiler, so the Erlang compiler itself, once Gleam compiles to Erlang, does optimizations. The BEAM as just-in-time optimizations and so on. So like it's really hard to come up with other ways of optimizing the code further. And it's already plenty fast. So far, we haven't had any complaints about, except in some, like for example, something was not implemented correctly, but we didn't have any complaints about performance. Gleam is plenty fast. So you can expect the performance you would expect using the languages it compiles down to, JavaScript or Erlang. Same thing for JavaScript. One thing we wanted to do, which was inlining, and it has been in the work for a while. Maybe the next release or the next couple releases are going to have inlining of some functions. We're going to start experimenting with that, see how it goes, because it would also enable some other optimizations we could be adding to the compiler, which is always nice. But again, we do that if we see there's a need for it, because we don't want to make things more complex for the sake of it. If adding inlining doesn't help in any reasonable way, then we're not adding it. But yeah, some code can get faster thanks to that. Then other things that I'm excited about, let me think. Well, there's some things that are in the compiler that usually are not user-facing, like some other optimizations when you compile to JavaScript, for example, that people will most likely never notice themselves, but I think are cool because I'm the one working on it. So as a language developer, I think there's a lot of exciting things. But the language itself, again, it's really stable, so no huge features. One thing that, though, I'm really excited about is having improving the testing developer experience. Right now, we have like a testing framework, Glee unit, runs your unit tests, pretty straightforward, very nice. But we are looking for ways to making like writing these kind of frameworks a bit easier, maybe with automatic test discovery and stuff. So that is going to improve the testing experience even further. We've already done that with a previous release, adding a new feature to the language, like doing assertions to make writing tests easier and have better error messages when a test fails. So again, as you can see, the things we are adding, they make the developer experience better. Better error messages, better developer experience when you're writing tests, and so on and so forth. So that's mainly the thing. Also, there's a full roadmap at gleam.run/roadmap, I think, where we put all the things that we are interested in for the Gleam development. So, for example, when integrating with Erlang, like other stuff supporting OTP, for example, some optimizations, better developer experience, and maybe things we would like to start looking into, but that are more into research territory. So they will require a lot more work. But yeah, if you want to have a peek of what is coming to Gleam, go to gleam.run/roadmap, and it's going to be there.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about that, the OTP integration. Like for those not in the know, like OTP stands for Open Telecom Platform, which is sort of like a big suite of, I guess you could call it like tools or like a framework, like an
sort of.
extended standard library, like common things you need in a server. For example, a long-running process that can process messages, for example, or like like supervisors, which is like a handles restart semantics in Erlang, etc. Like, so what's the status of like being able to use OTP from Gleam?
So yeah, it's kind of this collection of patterns, OTP, for building resilient applications. So like when you need like this tree of processes like supervising each other, when something fails, it needs to be restarted and so on. That's how I think that's how then Ericsson got their famous 9 nines of uptime in their system. Gleam is a typed language, while Erlang, the language it compiles down to, isn't. And some patterns in OTP we thought were quite hard to type, to give a type-safe abstraction over. So Gleam has the Gleam OTP library, which does exactly that. So it's fully compatible with OTP. So if you're using that,
nice.
it works seamlessly with regular OTP. And it gives you a type-safe way of defining your processes, your supervisors. So people who know OTP will know these names. And you can use that just regularly. I don't think it has all the patterns that are currently in OTP. So some of those might not have been implemented yet. But the main ones, like supervisor, like the static supervisor, I think, the dynamic one, they're all there and you can use them. They're compatible with regular OTP. So you can add things that come from Erlang, for example, to your supervision tree, and it's going to work seamlessly. So there's a great talk about this because, to be honest, I'm not that knowledgeable about OTP myself. But there's a great talk from Louis, the creator of the language. He gave at CodeBeam Europe this year. I'm not sure it's been released yet, but if it has been, I will send you the link. Maybe you can add it to the show notes. If people are interested about OTP, I think that is the number one resource you might want to go for.
Yeah, because I was an Erlang developer in a previous life. I mean, OTP is really nice. It has a lot of like very powerful abstractions, like you said, for like process supervision, automatic restarts, etc. So it's very nice to have that available from Gleam.
Yes.
And what's how does interacting with processes work in Gleam? Because in Erlang, a process is sort of like you have a process handle, and then in Erlang you can send a message to a process, and the message can be anything. But this is obviously not safe from a type. So very type unsafe. But how does it work in Gleam?
So there's this Gleam Erlang library which has these bindings to the Erlang process functions, so to spawn new processes, link new processes, send messages, and so on. And there's some lower level building blocks, like spawn process. It's going to give you a PID, a handle of a process, and that is untyped again, though Gleam is a typed language. And what we do is we use these building blocks to build sort of type-safe abstraction that allows you to constrain the kind of messages that you can send to a process, given this message can only deal with messages that have this shape, that are integers, for example, or whatever.
That's cool.
And so, yes, it builds upon those. So you're using Erlang processes, the lightweight green threads, whatever, all the nice things you get from the BEAM, but it has this thin abstraction over it, which makes sure that it is type safe when you're dealing with them, so that you're not sending some stray process to some stray message to a process that it's not going to be able to handle it.
Yeah, I mean, it's very tricky to do. I remember, like Robert, I read somewhere that he said that, like, when they were designing Erlang, they decided to make it a dynamic language because they had this like strict requirement that they should be able to like upgrade code while it was running.
Yeah.
And like nowadays, I mean, some people use that, but I mean, most software today is like, it's not really managed that way.
Yeah.
Like nowadays we have like, load balancers and like red-green deployments, etc. So I would say that's less of an issue, but I guess there's always going to be some tension between like a system that is like dynamic and in nature, and a type system that is static. But it seems to me that like Gleam has the potential to sort of give you the best of both worlds.
I mean, when it comes to a distributed system, there's going to be some need for checking what comes into your system, no matter what you're doing. And Gleam is not going to save you from that. Not even types can do that. So you're going to have to do a bit of checking on the outskirts of your code if messages come from an external system, because you don't control it. So that's one thing. But yeah, the hot code reloading, it's really hard to do in a type-safe way. In Gleam, with some effort, using FFI, you could try and work that into your code, into your Gleam code. I don't think it is worth it. Because again, as you said, nowadays we're dealing with containers, Docker, whatever. When you need to upgrade something, you pull down your container, you spin it back up, and you're good to go. You don't need this kind of hot code reloading unless you're working in some very specific environments with super niche needs. But at that point, I mean, I'm not sure, like it's really hard, and optimizing for this very incredibly small niche it's not worth it, I think, at this point.
For example, if you're building a phone switch, there's always Erlang. You can always go back to Erlang.
Yeah, I remember this. I don't remember if it's WhatsApp or Ericsson. At one point, there was this company using Erlang and the hot code reloading, and I remember this number, like half of their tests were for the hot code reloading parts to make sure they didn't mess it up. So it's adding a huge amount of complexity once you buy into that, to your system, to make sure that some hot code reload is not breaking one of the nodes that is then going to be unreachable and needs to be tear down and brought back up. And nowadays we don't do that a lot for most of our needs. We just bring containers up and work with containerized code.
Yeah, no, I mean it's a cool feature, but it's like question remains how useful it is in practice nowadays. I mean, well, I would like to ask you one final question, Giacomo, and then I'll let you go. But is there anything you wish that would have been done differently in Gleam? Something that's like maybe hard to change now, but that you wish would have been done differently from the beginning?
That's a great question. So there's maybe a couple of small things in Gleam that I wish I could change. So we have this document in the Gleam compiler where we have things we want to do for Gleam v2. So if we ever end up like making a V2 where we are allowed to introduce breaking changes to the language, there's the things we wish we could do.
Okay, cool.
Mostly it's oversights. So I remember there was this bug in the parser. This meant you could write code like omitting a comma somewhere. It was really niche, but we can't remove it because we are committed to being stable, to being V1.
Okay.
And if we were to remove it, that would be a breaking change because code that was compiling wouldn't be compiling anymore. So the way we do this is we add a warning to the compiler. It's going to warn you if you use the deprecated thing, and it's saying it's going to be removed in Gleam v2 so people can stop using it, get the warning and stop using it. And then so hopefully it's not going to be that bad. And again, those are mainly very niche, strange looking things that you wouldn't write normally in Gleam. So that's really not an issue. And other bigger things that I wish were different. Maybe type aliases. It's one thing that I don't particularly love in Gleam that is giving us a bit of a headache, because type aliases, it's basically saying I can give a different name to a type. So I can say, like much like in Haskell, you can say type user ID equals string. So you can then use the user ID to actually mean strings, but that is a different name. Though that is not actually giving you type safety, because you can use strings, not user IDs. Those are just strings. So it's not protecting you for passing strings around and messing things up. And that's usually a source of confusion. Why can't I do this? Well, you need to use like a regular type, not a type alias. So far, they have not been all that useful. I think they introduced more confusion than what they were worth. They are used for some things that are actually useful, but now we're starting to think, okay, how can we support this thing we want to do, we are currently doing with type aliases, with a different features that doesn't have all the drawbacks? So we're thinking how we could change it so that we can maybe in a Gleam v2 remove this feature that was not as good as we thought, and then transition to something better. But again, that's probably not going to happen for 5 years or something. So it's nothing to fret about.
Yeah, but I really like this idea of having like a V2 document, even if there is never a V2.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I feel personally sometimes that like when you need to, and you feel you have a strong urge to sort of fix something in the code base, even though it's not strictly necessary, maybe not worth it, it's still like, it bothers you. Just writing it down somewhere sort of alleviates most of the pain. It's like, okay, I acknowledge that this is a problem, and now I have a description of it. Now it's sort of like I've sort of managed to capture an incantation that captures this demon that makes me like whispers in my ears, like, you need to go in and fix that.
Yeah, I know it's no big deal, but it bothers me so much knowing that those things are there in the language. Because probably I'm the only person who knows, because I found them and I fixed them, and probably no one's ever written that, but it bothers me. My perfectionist self is not happy with that.
Yeah. But I think that's a good thing. It's like that kind of like that Bjorn Strustrup quote about, like, you know, there's languages that people hate and languages that no one use.
Yeah.
If there's a language where you're completely free to fix like backwards compatible or like backwards incompatible bugs, that just means there are no users. So
exactly.
I mean the alternative is much preferable, I would say.
No, I'd rather have users, absolutely. I'm really happy Gleam is being used and we care about this and it being compatible and being V1 for as long as possible. Absolutely.
Yeah, maybe it's done. Maybe this is the final version. Like, you know, who knows? I'm at least very, very happy that Gleam has users and that it has, you know, because I don't know, it sort of warms my heart that, like you said, it's not like any groundbreaking, like cutting edge research stuff. I mean, the Hindley-Milner types, for example, it's been around, and the OTP, Erlang, all of this has been around for, well, almost 50 years now, but it's like, you know, it still feels like it hasn't gotten the recognition or the love that it deserves. But Gleam sort of proves me, is sort of a counterpoint to that, I think. Like, you know, shows that, you know, these ideas are useful. You know, it's not just like, you know, the algebraic data types, for example. It's not just some like academic exercise or something like that. It's extremely useful for producing reliable working software.
Absolutely.
Yes. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Giacomo.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, unless there's something you would like to add, maybe something you would like to promote, where can people find you, for example?
Oh, okay. So that's good. Well, of course, Gleam. So the website is gleam.run, and you're going to find everything there about Gleam. Join the Discord. There's a link in the page if you want to join. That's where most of the community hangs, full of friendly people. I'm there if you want to reach out. You can send me a DM. I don't mind. So if you want to have a chat, I'm always up for it. I do streaming on Twitch, so you will find me on Twitch. I'm Giacomo Cavalieri, I think, on Twitch. or on Blue Sky. So I'm GiacomoCavalieri.me, sorry, that's English. And yeah, that's mainly where I am.
Yeah, and you launched your new personal website, right?
Oh yes, I did. GiacomoCavalieri.me. I went through a redesign. Just like I think it was the last day of the year. It was New Year's Eve when I finally finished it. I'm really happy with it. There's a picture of me talking at a conference. I love that picture, so I wanted to put it on my website.
Yeah.
And the website is actually built using Gleam. So yeah.
Of course.
Of course it is.
Naturally. Yeah. Anything else you'd like to add? Or?
I think that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it could be like, if you haven't settled on any New Year's resolutions yet, maybe one could be a good suggestion. Could be that you should learn.
Oh, okay.
Learn
So
Gleam.
New Year's resolution. Well,
yes.
I want this to be a year full of Gleam. So of course, Gleam contributions. That's my main thing. I'm part of the core team. I will be doing a lot of Gleam. Then conferences. I want to be talking at a lot of conferences this year as well. I had loads of fun doing it. I want to try and submit to as many conferences as I can. If you're an organizer or in some panel deciding speakers, reach out. I would love to speak at your conference, whatever that is. And well, it's not coding related. I want to learn Polish. So that's another New Year's resolution I set up for 2026. And I think that's it. I like to keep them small because otherwise I'm never going to make it.
Yeah, it's very, very good. Like keep them achievable.
Yeah.
Knock them out. Okay. Yes. Thank you so much again, Giacomo.
Thank you.
Have a nice day, and to all my listeners, you too. Well, you should also have a nice day and try Gleam. It's good. It's fun.
Do it. It's really good.
Yes.